Hi y'all, Darla here with Growing Tropical, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the Bougainvillea. Aren't these beautiful? It has no blooms on it, but it's absolutely beautiful because I know what it's going to look like when it absolutely blooms and just, gets magnificent with color. If I'm not mistaken, this one is a purpley color, like a dark purple color, and it's absolutely beautiful. I have another one that's here behind me. It's also got a purple bloom on it as well, but it's variegated. You can see the difference in the leaves. We've got a solid color, and then we've got the variegated. Bougainvillea are absolutely stunning. I love them. I've been growing them all my gardening life. If I've learned one pure and simple truth though, for me, I do not like growing bougainvillea in the ground. They produce the most god-awful thorns. So when you put them in the ground, they are very, very hardy growers. Living here in South Florida, I'm a zone 10. They are hardy growers. And I've had them in different areas of our property where they are absolutely spectacular. But when you go to trim them, or I should say prune them, oh boy, let me tell you, they will pick you. I've had them stuck in my fingers and in my arms. So my husband just pretty much threatened with my life that said, do not grow those in the ground anymore. And he's right. If I had a landscaper that was coming maybe to do professional trimming for me, I may consider something like that. But because my husband and I take care of everything on our property, I'm going to stick to growing them actually in a pot. But anyway, I love Bougainvillea. They are virtually disease and pest free. I can count a number of times on my hands when I've had to just do a little bit of maintenance on them when it came to insecticides and stuff like that. But for the most part, they're pretty much disease, and they are disease and pest resistant. Maybe because of those darn thorns that are on there, the pests don't bother with them. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, a little bit about the Bougainvillea. They are native to South America, like over in Brazil and stuff, and they are equatorial. And what I mean by that is they bloom their best when they grow in an environment, or a region I should say, where the daytime and the nighttime lengths are the same. So over in South America, that is pretty much year round, and these guys tend to bloom year round over in those regions. But over here in good old North America, we have actually two cycles that the Bougainvillea actually goes through. It goes through a vegetative period, whereby that it puts on its stems and its leaves. And if the Bougainvillea gets enough sun, usually a minimum of 5 hours, your Bougainvillea will do its best when it goes, when it gets a sun of at least 5 hours or more. Now, after it goes through its vegetative cycle, or I should say during its vegetative cycle, if you have your Bougainvillea in enough sun, it will go into its next stage, which means its blooming period. It'll start putting on all those beautiful little buds all over the place. And as it's getting its sun or whatever, it will continue to just explode with color. And again, given the fact that it will be in enough sun, it will bloom anywhere from 3, 5, 6 weeks or so. It'll bloom a long time. That is my experience. What else can I say about Bougainvillea? Just a little bit about the fertilizing on Bougainvillea. Uh-oh, somebody's car alarm went off. Okay, good, it's over. Fertilizing on your Bougainvillea. I hope you guys can see this behind me. I use, it's BGI, that's the brand, Bogain on my Bougainvilleas. It is a 6, 8, 10. That's these three little numbers that are down here. That is the perfect balance for your Bougainvillea. Again, like I said, they are profuse bloomers. And a lot of times I've had people say to me, well, why don't you just give them something like a 20-20-20? No. And this is the reason why. Bougainvillea, while they do need to have a well-balanced fertilizer, a 20-20-20, for example, would be just a little overkill. Bougainvillea need to have a nice good blend of nitrogen and phosphate. And if you give your Bougainvillea too much nitrogen, it will actually inhibit the blooming on your Bougainvillea. It took me a little while to wrap my head around that too, but it is very true. You want it to be able to put on nice, beautiful green shoots, but you want to be able to have your nitrogen levels low enough to where it doesn't inhibit the blooming cycle, because after all, bougainvillea are the most beautiful when they are blooming. So anyway, fertilizing is very, very important. I like this particular brand because it has a chelated iron in there. So of like, I think it's like 5% or something. It's all on the back. It tells you how to use it, you know, how to measure it out and everything. But it gives you all the breakdown on the actual 6, 8, 10, and the minors. But back to the iron, it has about 5% iron, and about half of that is a chelated iron. So while you've got your soluble iron going to it, you know, perking up your green immediately or whatever, much like your water soluble fertilizers and stuff, you've got your, you can get it right to the root right quick. But the chelated iron is in there, and it's going to stay in there for a little while, and it's going to continue feeding it the iron that it needs to keep its nice, beautiful, lush green leaves and everything. So then there's the trimming of your bougainvillea. You could do it 3 different ways here, and it starts with either, and it depends on the size, you know, whether you have it growing in your landscape or whether you have it, you know, growing much like I have it here in a container. You can prune it, you can trim it, or you can pinch it. When I think of pruning, I think of, you know, a bougainvillea that has been out in your landscape, and I've had this, where it's growing up on a fence line or growing up a wall. You definitely you're going to need to get in there, and you're going to need to prune that, because they will get out of control, they'll get large and in charge, and they will take over. So in that particular case, you'd want to trim your bougainvillea, or prune it. I'm sorry, you want to prune it. Trimming basically means that you'd want to take off, you know, probably a couple inches. So for example, on this one that I've got here, right now this is in pretty good shape. So let's look at this one. This one is going to actually go into a hanging basket. So I want some of these long runners, but there are going to be, like, for example, I'm going to use this one. If I would trim it, I want to come in here, maybe the first, maybe like up to about 6 inches. I'm going to want to come in here, and I'm going to want to trim off that 6 inches. And that's going to be to keep it in check, because once you start letting these guys get too long, what ends up happening is the center of it starts getting really, really sparse. And then you've got no growth in the center and all of it hanging out. Now, maybe you could correct that by, you know, bringing it up on a trellis or something. I'm not sure. I just know that I like for mine to be nice and full in the center. Now, this one is a little more sparse than I care for it to be, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go through and I'm going to be trimming off some, like I said, some of these longer branches, thereby promoting more growth back up into this area. And then you have your pinching. Usually the pinching, I reserve that, in my experience, I reserve that to when, right after it goes through its vegetative state, where it's put on all these beautiful little shoots and everything. You'll start noticing on your bougainvillea, as it's starting to put on its buds, all this, it'll have this really pretty, like all these, like, I don't know if you call it saplings, or this new growth, this soft, really soft new growth on the tips. What I usually like to do is I put my glasses on and I go in there, and just where there's going to be like buds, I go in just above that, and just the very, very tips, I snip off, or pinch rather, with my fingertips. And usually what ends up happening within just a couple of days, I mean, it just amazes me how it just makes all those blooms, or it appears to make those blooms, just burst very, very quickly by just pinching those little ends. And it makes all the difference in the world. So again, we talked about, let's see, we talked about fertilizing, we talked about trimming and pruning and pinching. Your soil, that is also very important. It's important for any plant that you put into a container. But for the bougainvilleas are very drought, and they are very salt tolerant, thereby growing very good in our coastal regions. But they're very, very drought tolerant. And you'd want something, and they don't like a lot of water. Now, while they do like to be watered, regularly watered, you'd want to be very, very mindful to not give them too much water. And I have to be very careful here living again in South Florida, because we get a lot of rainfall. We do go through some summers where, you know, we don't have as much rainfall maybe as the previous season or something, but as a rule, we do get a lot of rainfall here, living here in South Florida. And so we have to be very, very careful. There's been some times where I will have like my plants out either around by the pool, or, you know, just out like in the front like area, like maybe lining the sidewalk or something like that, where if we're just like in a deluge of water, I will end up picking my pots up and I will bring them up on the porch or under an eave or whatever, just to protect them from that excessive, water, which is, again, why it's so important to make sure that your soil, or actually it should be soil-ish, but your potting mix is what I guess I should say, your potting mix is well draining. You would not want to get a potting mix or use a potting mix where, like, for example, say you bought like a peat, like all peat or like a lot of peat in your mix for the bougainvillea, because peat retains moisture. Trust me, I have a lot of plants that are around here that could really use that. And there are a lot of plants that I will put that peat mixture in there to really retain that moisture for some of the plants. But a bougainvillea, you definitely wouldn't want to use a peat mixture for a bougainvillea. You want to make sure that your soil is very well draining for your bougainvillea. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I haven't mentioned about the bougainvillea. If you treat your bougainvillea well, if you give it the proper soil to grow in, if you give it the proper fertilizer and a lot of sun, your bougainvillea is going to reward you with absolutely a lot of beautiful blooms. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over and show you one of the bougainvilleas that I actually have in a hanging basket, and I'm going to let you guys watch me plant up the second one. Okay, so come on along with me and let's go plant up these bougainvilleas. Okay, here's the bougainvillea that I had planted previously. He's been in probably for, I don't know, maybe about a month now is when I planted him up, and he is absolutely beautiful. He just finished his blooming cycle. You can see there's a couple of little blooms that I actually have in here, these beautiful purpley blooms. But you know what I love about this bougainvillea so much is I love the variegation on the actual leaves. Because when it's not in bloom, when it's going through its vegetative cycle and it's producing all these beautiful variegated green leaves, it doesn't have to have the blooms, I guess is what I'm basically saying. When it's not in bloom, the beautiful variegated leaves are still so very pretty. Now these baskets, they're hanging on the front of our pool cabana. They get right at about 5 hours of sun. So these probably won't bloom like super proficiently. I will more than likely get a lot of blooms, but it won't probably explode with color because it won't be in an all-day sun situation like the one that was when I was doing the video when I first started out. That one in that container, that gets a full-on 8 hours of sun, so that one will explode with color. And I will keep you guys updated to show you what that one looks like as well when it's exploded with color. But again, like I said, even if this one doesn't get the full-on explosion of color, the variegated leaves are just so beautiful on it, and I love them in these baskets. I thought it would just really be pretty, and you can see it from my kitchen window. So we'll go over to the other one and I'm going to show you how I pot this guy up. Okay, so in this basket I've got it all lined up with my actually it's actually a weed liner. I've been starting to do that a little bit more, cost effective I think, and I'm getting a lot of good results with it. But I've got a nice weed liner in here for my basket, and then what I've got is some drip line, and I'm going to go ahead and just lay this aside for right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and see about getting this guy dumped out upside down. Whoop, let me do it over here. I have let him grow. Ooh, he's got a very small little root ball. What I did was I added my fertilizer in here into the top, I don't know, couple inches of soil already. So I mixed it in so I don't have to do that, but I'm going to be very careful, and I'm going to just kind of coax him in here with his long branches. And I'm going to be very careful while I'm doing this as well, because these guys, like I said, their pickers are just horrendous, or they can be. So let's see if I can get him out of there, and I'll put him down like so. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll fill it all in with some soil. Okay, I got it all planted up. It was a little pickery, I'm not gonna lie. These little branches are just a little bit too long. So what I'm going to go through and do is I'm going to go ahead and probably take about anywhere from 3 to 5 inches off probably all the ends, like these big ends or whatever, thereby going ahead and creating a little more fullness. It'll shove all the new growth back into the center, and then I'll get guys that look like these up in here, all this new growth. But I think it's going to be very, very, very pretty. Again, these guys on the front of our cabana, this one and the one that I showed you before that was already planted up, these guys are going to get about 5 hours, and they will bloom. I have no doubt that they will bloom, but they will not probably bloom as profusely as the one that I've got in the pot that's going to get the 8 hours of sun. So I hope you guys found this video informative and learned a little bit about Bougainvillea. I love them. Like I said, they're a staple plant here in South Florida, and they're absolutely beautiful. Whether you grow them in hanging baskets, containers, or you got them growing up a wall, they're absolutely the most spectacular plants. They truly, truly are. And we don't get a lot of we don't have a lot of what they call winter interest, you know, in the northern countries where you guys get, or they get snow, I should say, not necessarily you guys, but people who get snow, I should say. They have a lot of winter interest with their trees and stuff up there. We don't really get a lot of winter interest, but this particular one is what I could definitely deem it as winter interest, because it puts on some beautiful, beautiful blooms here. October through March, actually, you will find a lot of our Bougainvilleas are just an absolute explosion of color. So anyway, you guys, I hope you found this video informative. And if you did, if you liked it, I hope you give the video a thumbs up and you subscribe to the channel. So until the next video, bye.